There it is.
All right.
In all my sleepy glory. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. And
Absolutely.
boy, I learned a ton from Josh. What a smart guy. And
Yep.
just, I'm not sure if my presentation is going to be anywhere near as useful, but I'll do my best. It's a little off topic for most of you guys, but let me give it a shot here.
All right, Mark.
And there it is. Little media in the blockchain era. Just full screen mode. Voila. Okay, so I'm going to go through this presentation fairly quickly. There's some information here since it's a very expert crowd. I think that you folks will know. And then I'd love to do some Q&A at the end if I can, which would be terrific. I know I only get about a half an hour. Really appreciate being invited to be a part of this event. My name is Marc Scarpa. I'm the co-founder of Decentric Media. Decentric Media is a 24-hour global broadcast network dedicated to decentralized culture, finance, and technology. We're a startup. We have quite a great group of backers and advisors. I invite everyone to go to decentric.media.com, check out our video, and look what we're, check out what we're looking to do. My background real quick is I've been on the internet for a long time, since about 1979. I was a phone freaker early on, went to film school, worked at MTV News, at CBS News. I was one of the founding producers of CNET and have been doing a lot of live participatory media and live streaming for many years. And the blockchain, sort of is the 3.0 for me, internet being 1.0, web being 2.0, and this is being 3.0. The power and the revolution of it is just overwhelming so many things. And I think a lot of folks really overlook how blockchain is going to impact media, audio and visual content. So looking at supply chain management and other areas. So, I mean, blockchain in general, as you can see, is not just disrupting finance. It's everywhere. It's automotive, it's charity, it's cybersecurity. It's all across the board, travel, real estate. There's just endless examples of how blockchain is going to be utilized. And some very interesting areas for me are, again, video and music streaming and these type of areas. Overall, just a general quote, the internet revolution really has reshaped 30% of the global economy. The entire internet sector, both public and private, in 1996 was only about 120 billion. And so I looked at this when I saw this this chart from Genesis, source from Scribblers, I really thought that this was an interesting timeline because we are really just at the beginning of this blockchain revolution, it is just growing tremendously, and history is repeating itself. The medium is the message ultimately. We've all heard Marshall McLuhan talk about this. The idea of the scales and the size of what linear broadcast did for the world, and now you're introducing a decentralized media infrastructure that cannot ultimately be turned off. It's not centrally controlled. This changes the power structure of how media is distributed and consumed all across the board. And for me, it's very exciting. As I was saying, media is still heavily centralized. You have basically about 4 or 5 companies that control all of global media. CBS, Viacom, Disney, NBC, being the top 3.
Sorry, your slides are not moving. I'm not sure if there's an issue there.
Do you see the media in 2020 slide?
We see the future of media in the blockchain era. Maybe reload the program.
That's just how about now?
There we go. Okay, we didn't see any of those.
Well, they weren't that interesting anyway.
You,
This
sir.
is a good one. How about now? Are you guys able to see a little bit of my desktop too?
Yes,
I would
sir.
imagine.
You are good.
Okay, great. Gotta have a little comedy in here. So, these are important things. Now we're getting to the meat of it. So for me, there's 5 ways that blockchain is really disrupting the media industry. It's re-envisioning publishing. It's introducing this idea of micropayments to monetize content creation. The whole concept of music and digital rights management is being transformed as we speak. Cleaning up fake news is, I think, a very relevant area to look at right now, although it's a bit harder and a bit further out. Although with AI and other technologies coming in, and object recognition and facial recognition and so on, we should be able to look at fake news in a video asset and identify a lot quicker than how we're able to do it today. And then probably the biggest one is actually advertising. Making it extremely targeted, less intrusive, and almost participatory in a way where you want to participate in the ads in order to reap rewards. So let's talk about music and digital rights. There's sort of 4 main areas. We're all familiar with smart contracts, digital rights management, and attribution, excuse me. The issue here is a lot of artists that have contributed to a song, for example, are simply not in a database anywhere. And they're not getting credit for the music that they've created or for the sample that they've created as part of a song. And we still see these battles today, even with top name artists, who have ripped off some other artist. And in many cases, they don't even know that they've done that. It's their producer's taken a hook or whatever it is, and they've included it in their song. So they're not necessarily doing it willingly or maliciously. It's just sort of happening. With blockchain, you can have a little bit better digital rights management and attribution than we currently have today. Digital theft is obviously another big issue. Supply chain management on music and how it flows from point A to point B to the consumer. And the most important part is the resolution of royalty disputes. Everyone has heard about creative accounting in the entertainment business. This is film, TV, but where it is most pervasive and probably the most abused is in the music industry. So, you make a hit song, it's #1 on the charts, but for some reason you're not getting your royalties and you're wondering why. How does that happen in the 21st century? And it does. It happens every day, even with top artists. So by being able to have an ID on every single song or every stem of a track, stems are the assets that create a frame or a bar, if you will, in a musical track, and to be able to track down to the stems and how they're utilized and where they're utilized on a global basis across the entire internet, and be able to distribute royalties based upon that usage is a revolutionary use case. So, this is a little bit more breakdown. Going into this, Spotify, largest music distributor out there, a couple of years ago, or about last year actually, acquired Media Chain. They're a digital rights management startup working on using blockchain technology to help solve these problems. The reason why Spotify went and purchased this blockchain company is because they had this dispute of unpaid royalties in 2016 that cost them several $100 million. So they're looking to get ahead of the curve. I talked about some of the details here already. So now let's move on to micropayments, this idea of micropayment monetization and new pricing models. The thing that's nice about micropayments, this works across all media, whether it be publishing, music, video, whatever it might be. This idea of being able to be paid again for a stem, a hook, a bar, a word, it can be, you can be compensated for an element of the song as well as the entire song. And it creates a new revenue stream for artists that typically may not have been compensated in the past. And this creates these new pricing models as well. Again, creative music industry accounting, at the moment, you're not getting paid on a fraction of a penny. They in fact put minimums in place in terms of how much they pay out to you. Same thing with YouTube. You won't get your payment unless it's a certain minimum. So there's in essence hundreds of millions of dollars that are left on the table because that particular artist and that creator is not reaching a specific threshold in order to be compensated. It's kind of a crazy concept. You should be paid no matter what. The second you create something, you need to be compensated for it. And using blockchain technology, you're able to be compensated down to a fraction of a penny, which is very revolutionary. So advertising, the big 800-pound gorilla, advertising drives media. I think that is definitely going to be changing. We saw a shift of advertising from traditional media buys going into television and radio. Now it's more into Google and Facebook and Twitter and all the social platforms. But you're looking at media buying as a whole new, using the blockchain in a whole new way. So the marketing group launched a blockchain-enabled advertising agency called Truth. It will use Ethereum in order to create smart contract on technology and underpin its media buying and planning platforms. So in essence, it's a supply chain management, being able to track where the actual expenditures are going to be on a micropayments level back to who the media buyer is buying media on behalf of. Right now, the reports that they're getting are pretty broad. You give me $100 million, I'm the media buyer, I'm going to go out and spend it for you. We're going to spend X amount of dollars in these exact areas, and here's a bucket of how that money has been spent and what the results are. Of course, with Google and Facebook, they're very detailed, but using blockchain and Ethereum, you can actually get into a much more detailed environment. Now, we've all heard of Brave. I hope everyone on this call has at least heard of Brave, the basic attention token. This is a really interesting situation where you're compensating advertisers and users while they're using the browser. So they're revolutionizing the business model of the browser itself. If I want to engage in advertising and participate in advertising, I can earn credits as a result of that that could be then used as payments for other things that I want to purchase via the blockchain and via the internet. Permission-based ads. This is another interesting area for advertising. Allows consumers to choose what ads they see and who gets their data and who gets paid for viewing their ads via the ALX token. Publishing. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. The thing that I like about the publishing area, this is print publishing, is really the first point here is peer review. This idea of you have something that you're putting out that has scientific fact in it, but it's very expensive and opaque to be able to get a good pool of data back from those advisors, if you will, on that particular review of the printed word. Using blockchain, it would help the reviewers to have verifiable identity, verifiable facts, increase transparency, and just speed up the scientific discovery and the academic process in general, creating a lot of progress. This process right now of peer review for scientific papers is a very, very lengthy, long process. And we can all understand why. Access control and so on. Cleaning up fake news. This one, I think, has a lot of challenges. People are talking about this quite a bit right now. The idea of being able to check reputation, have ad-free journalism, and of course, fact-checking. So there's some examples of folks that are doing, that are sharing digital content built on top of the Decent network. Rewards distributed in public are based upon the reputation of the authors built exclusively from the views and the feedback of its readers. This already sort of exists in other environments such as Medium and so on. But if I'm able to have a deeper fact check on the author itself, it builds that reputation and makes that reputation a lot stronger. Ultimately, we all want to get to an ad-free journalistic environment with the hope that as a result of an ad-free journalistic environment, we are going to be seeing less influenced news, if you will. News that is being published because the author is writing it, because it is newsworthy and it has authentic information to be shared. And it's not influenced by the bias of the advertisers of the publication itself. Or even worse, they're not writing about a particular topic because the publisher or the media network is telling them, you can't do that because it will piss off our advertisers. Fact checking, there's a few of these. I think this is probably the most interesting use case where you're able to just check words in an article or phrases to see if they're actually scientifically valid. Is this statement correct? How do you do that in real time? There's an army of fact checkers in television and radio and of course print journalism that work for these organizations who are, the majority of it right now is a manual process, and the ability to have that become real time using AI and blockchain in order to accelerate that is a profound revolution in the way that we're going to consume media. Now, in order to do that in video, I touched upon this earlier, you're looking at real-time live streaming, if you will, or live broadcasting, where you have to almost check the audio, the words that are coming out of the speaker's mouth in order to know if what that person is saying is real or not. So that's audio recognition, and then of course there's video recognition to determine if it's a deep fake and other sorts of things. So that's in audio and video. This is going to take quite a bit of time. So before I turn over the questions, this is what I hope the key takeaways are for everyone, is that it's really going to disrupt all four areas of media: content production, aggregation, distribution, and consumption. And through blockchain distribution, through the disruption of blockchain, you're looking at new pricing models, content bypassing aggregators and distributors. So, the gatekeepers, if you will, of our modern day media infrastructure will be circumvented. This also, as I said earlier, you can create a media network that cannot be taken down. Now think about that. If I'm broadcasting live and I'm NBC and something's happening, and I have someone that I'm interviewing, and for whatever reason, they are saying something that's against FCC standards or against the principles of the network, I can just turn them off. But through blockchain and distributed streaming using IPFS and other technologies, there's just no way to take that media asset down. It's just going to be there because of how it's architected. Royalty payments, monetization, the way we consume paid content is going to be very interesting. And there's a new group here. There's content brokers, content creators, aggregators, platform providers, and of course, performance rights organizations and so on. So that's us in a nutshell. In Decentric Media, our goal is to create a new architecture on how you build a media news network, completely decentralized in its architecture, meaning no central offices, if you will, no $20 million studios that you would see, for example, CNN and so on. We're living in an era now where everything has to be decentralized in terms of the architecture of how you work. And we're able to do this with cloud-based technologies that allow us to switch in the cloud, like a control room in the cloud, if you will. And our subject matter hopefully will resonate with everybody on this call and millions of other people worldwide as we look to promote the adoption ultimately of 1 billion original crypto wallet holders by 2025. So that was my presentation. I hope everyone liked it, and I would love to get some questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Marc. Really appreciate it. This was great. Christina, I'll let you kind of kick it off.
Sure. I hope our audience has lots of questions, but I, of course, want to dig into the AI and the sentiment and the NLP and the taxonomy side of it. What can you tell me about the data and the technology behind your projects?
I think in terms of how we look at data, I think we look at data is the way that, you know, Brittany Kaiser, who's coming up in a few minutes, is on our board of advisors. She's a good friend. And there's, without question, we look at the data of our users and how we're going to architect that in our product is something that is theirs. It's their data. It's not ours. They can share it with other members of Decentric Media, because Decentric will be a member-based organization as opposed to solely, you know, having a revenue stream and being supported by advertising. So we look at that as a way to move us beyond being subjugated to the outside influences that exist in traditional media. So anyone that has any sort of movement or activity on our platform, they'll be able to look at that and say, okay, this is what I've been doing on the Decentric Media platform, have in essence their own little portfolio of what that data is, and take it with them and or share it with other third parties.
Awesome. So I'm going to take it back a bit. When I used to walk the halls of LA Times and I was helping them go from a paper to a digital platform, which was a very steep learning curve. And shout out to the folks over there. They're still going, and lots of changes. There's a certain level of institutional hallowed ground for journalism. It seems to kind of, I'm curious on your thoughts about that. And then I have curious thoughts around turnkey solutions for the actual editorial process. Like, it's a lot to get something published. Like, that's a big process to try and like take apart and reassemble.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure exactly what, so which, how should I answer the question? Which part of the question would you like me to?
You can take it wherever you want. I realize that I don't want to get too much into fake news kind of things, but there is a level of authenticity that happens with sentiment and NLP. And I just wonder what you think that does for journalism as a whole.
I'm not a big fan of sentiment in journalism. I think that sentiment is great in social media, because that's the type of platform where you're expressing your feelings. Sentiment in journalism, from a user perspective, they can express how they feel about the article or about the video to the other people in the group, but the journalists themselves needs to stay neutral and make a media asset that stands up to scientific information and just basic facts, right? The problem has been that it's a tremendous amount of work to fact check. Twitter was ignored for a very long time in the beginning, and then they created a group there called Twitter TV, and they did a tremendous job. And once Twitter TV was established, you started to see tweets on broadcast television. Like, it just happened all of a sudden. It was several years into the existence of Twitter, and you know, at that point they were using Twitter as a source. How can you do that? Like, Twitter is a self-publishing platform. You can't really, there's no way to actually check that source of information without, in essence, having an interconnected blockchain-driven global database of facts that's tied to one another in some way, and in distributed architecture. So, you know, I think that the news industry as a whole is ripe for disruption. It's still, as you pointed out, the transition from a print publication to a digital publication, that took 20 years. And it shouldn't have. It should have taken 2 years. And what happened as a result was, instead of that transition happening quickly for legacy organizations, you saw new news media organizations come and start to exist. I mean, CNET, we were brand new. I mean, nobody knew what we were doing, and we were reporting on all the cool stuff, all the tech. So, you know, I think that's it. It's just like, it's out with the old and in with the new. You know, Cheddar's been doing a great job. Newsy's doing a good job. there are some terrific organizations out there that are brand new media channels that are still taking the fundamental principles of the formats of linear broadcast, for example, and just doing it in a new way. We look to do it in a very forward-thinking way. Oh, I see we have someone else coming up. So.
Someone else come up. Yeah, you know, just one point. I just wanted to agree with you in terms of sentiment around journalism. What we're most interested in, because we, you know, have a strong NLP presence, and some of the things that we're doing internally on our exploratory research side of things is, yeah, definitely a lot on Twitter and some of the forums, and that kind of first-person voice of people that are just giving their opinions, and you can tie that to an emotion and categorize it and all that stuff. We're most interested in somebody publishes an article, like what are the comments and what are the reactions to that piece particularly, because I agree journalistically, it should be very neutral in terms of the sentiment from that author. So 100% agree. And then for us, it's really categorizing like who are the trusted players and the distribution partners and the publishers that you can actually trust, right? Which is also tough as well. Because, you know, they tend to publish fake news sometimes without even knowing it sometimes, or they're just kind of republishing. So that becomes an eternal challenge. And that's why we're definitely trying to crack that net open. It's just going to be very difficult over time, but I think a lot of people are definitely trying it as well.
Rule of thumb is don't trust anything unless you experience it yourself. And when you talk about, you know, looking at the comments and looking at the tweets and the reactions from the audience, you have to understand that there are very powerful groups out there that have social farms that are flooding comments on news events to influence the change in the narrative of that story and to ruin your data collection. So, you know, you might put the most wonderful thing up in the world that is something that you would think that everyone could get behind, like peace and love, but you'll have 1,000 comments about how peace and love is bullshit. And that's coming from a social farm in Indiana, and it's sponsored by X PAC, right? That has a corporate reason why they don't want that narrative to be out there. So, you know, I think that everyone on the call, the best piece of advice I can give you is don't consume media, study it.
Love it. Great message. Thank you, Mark, as always, for joining us.
Thank you.
So we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Had a great time. Appreciate it.